All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about some things people like to say about implementing remote work in reference to organizing, managing, and best practices. The first statement here, before I even read it, I'm going to say I agree with this statement. You need to be well organized and managed for remote work. Absolutely agree. I just feel like it's somewhat misleading.
Which part's misleading there? Is it a certain word or
Yeah, and I touched on this last time when we talked about the perspective shift too, but it's just like, why is it remote work? I think you need to be well organized and managed for work in general if you want to be successful. You can just show up and be like, "Hey, let's just make this happen," but I just don't think that's going to work out too well for you if that's your approach.
yeah.
And so it's kind of the same thing for remote work. If you're just like, oh yeah, and we talked about the pandemic a little bit, and I think we saw some and I think that's why some people have a bad taste in their mouth for remote work or digital learning or distance learning is because that was kind of like, let's just throw everybody to the wolves and do the best that we can. And it wasn't very good. And so, that's what happens when things aren't organized and managed well. And the same thing happens at the office building as well. If you're just like, well, let's just hopefully everything goes well this quarter.
Yeah, because that just leaving it to it's going to just happen. And that's one of the things, and we'll get into definitely the pros and cons, but I often hear of the biggest one for being back in person of like, oh, well, it's the incidental, just running into someone and it will make magic happen. And we've worked in so many different areas. We've worked in business organizations, but also with educational organizations with implementing video conferencing, video communications, and distance learning. And that's the one thing that, we always start with. It's really starting with what are your goals and intentions and really being thoughtful as you put together your plan, whether you're teaching or whether you're leading a team, whatever it is, it ends up when your expectations are clear and you communicate and you're developing your team or you're teaching your students, whatever the expectations are, what are your processes and procedures, that's how you get high quality learning and you get an exceptionally high performance team. But it's not just like, oh, we'll just have the three people that bump into each other and it will all work. I don't buy that.
I don't buy that either. Anybody that's talked to me for a while knows like this whole surface level stuff. I mean, that's kind of one of my soapboxes. Like, I feel like lots of things are very surface level. And as soon as you dig like 1 inch below the surface, you're like, what is actually going on here? And I think that plays out well in the office. It's like it looks like people are busy. It looks like people are working. And it's like, are they?
I've worked with groups to where I hear most of it because I've always worked, we've worked within video communication. I'm always like teaching people, how to use it, technology. And what I've heard so many times is that people, it's almost like, I don't want to say they don't want to, or they'll encounter something that's really a people process, a challenge that people don't understand, or, it's something that could be when I say fixed, corrected, whatever, by what are your processes and procedures that you're going to follow? Instead, what they'll want is they'll have this desire for the technology to solve all the problems. Who knows? Maybe AI will solve all of our problems, Ken, but so many times that the technology would get blamed about, oh, this is the problem of the technology. And so they'll chase like trying to spend so much money or try to, request different little features because they're trying to solve something that you're like, hey, you could just ask them to stop, or you could just say, do this. And it's fixed instead of trying to spend, I don't know, $50,000 or more trying to solve something with extra programming and extra bells and whistles. Is that another one of your soapboxes?
Yeah. And I think in the past, when the technology wasn't as good as it is now, it was somewhat valid. Like you'd be like, yeah, this isn't working properly, or it's just not there yet. It's not where it needs to be. But as the technology's improved and we still see some of the same bad practices happening, it's more about the people and the policies and procedures than it is about the actual technology of things.
Yeah, I remember so many things around microphones. I know we talk video communication, but so many things like, well, how do we can't hear because they're talking too loud or, they're having side conversations. We want the microphone to do this or to mute it, certain, and this and that. I'm like, and the question would be, what would you do if everyone was in the same room? We would ask them to not talk while the speaker's talking. Like, well, we could do that on video too, couldn't we? Attention should be on the speaker or the content. But they were always like, well, we're having this thing where they're having extra conversation. Ask them to not to do that. So, but it was the thing when you said when the technology wasn't as good, it was easier to crosstalk based on the technology because you mentioned this earlier of the latency. So it would sometimes be, I don't know, 3 or 4 seconds that it would take for the, audio and video to be compressed and then decompressed, encoded, decoded, whatever the terms were. But by the time it came to you, it used to be like talking on a walkie-talkie, and you'd be like, okay, over, and kind of have that like the
Over.
code word at the end. You're like, thank you, or whatever it was. I mean, we would do that because it was so much. And so now, people can just kind of jump in. You hear people like immediately. And so you're like, okay, what would you do? You can almost do, because I noticed this in a group I was working with this weekend, and it was the audio and video was so good. It was almost like being in the same room to where if two people started talking at once, one could step back and say, okay. Because in the past, the delay was so much that by the time both people would stop, they would stop and start at the same time several times. But I noticed that this weekend that the technology has improved so much that it was very similar to being in the same room, and the people were able to take care of it, Ken.
Yeah, I mean, even the echo cancellation, like, it's gotten so good now. Like, it really is a lot better just picking up the person that's supposed to be talking and not picking up all the little sounds and noises that might be happening around them.
Now, do you have, as we're thinking about as people are sharing and talking, like how do you take questions? Have you noticed anything about that, like in face to face versus like if you had a large video event? Does that fall into this same area of like, is it the people? Is it the technology?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the other point under here about now that we've actually been able to do some of this remote work stuff is like we can look at what are the best practices of on-site, what are the best practices of remote, and maybe how can we make on-site better through some of the things that we learn through remote? How can we make remote better through some of the things that we do in the same space together? And like you're mentioning, like the questions is one of them that I noticed where like I went to a presentation on a topic that my church was hosting. There was going to be a Q&A part of it, right? And so normally, you just be like, raise your hand, ask your questions or whatever. Well, what they implemented was they were like, oh, like here's a Q. I think they threw a QR code up there you could take a picture of, and it took you to a website that you would just put your questions and comments into that the hosts were like watching as they came in. So then they could combine questions or be like, okay, we're going to follow up with this person like separately. And so I was like, oh, that's a cool, like, that's something we would do in a remote situation that they applied to an on site situation that made it better. They were able to kind of stay on their agenda timeline and not get caught up in like maybe somebody over getting nervous when they go to ask their question and they start fumbling over themselves or they keep going on and it's hard to like be like okay or like hey that's not really an appropriate question to ask in front of it's like it took care of like so many things that I've seen go wrong in those types of situations.
Or that's not a
Yeah.
question. That's not even a question. There's no question in there.
Yeah. Like, what's the question? Yeah.
And I noticed that there was an item about the tech support for remote events. Well, I was thinking the pandemic we mentioned just because everybody had that experience. One of the things I noticed is they would just like put people in these, big Zoom sessions. I saw many times where the presenter was supposed to do like all of the tech part too, in addition to presenting. And I was thinking back to when we would do on-site conferences. Most on-site conference has what? A whole tech crew that comes in. Hey, you got your laptop hooked up, making sure the audio is coming through, making sure you've got your, flip your displays and all of that. And so I think that was one of the things we always suggested as we worked with groups or, even as we supported virtual groups and had such feedback to where people were like, oh, I didn't have to worry about the technology. I could focus on my content. And I think that's one of the things that with the being able to do things remotely, you can just increase such access for content for your workers. And so, did you have a different example for that?
Yeah, on the flip side of that, yeah, it was like this was an example somebody told us, and this person had no reason to lie to us, so I'm assuming it's true. But I was like, that is absolutely insane. It was like taking a thing that stinks about being in person and then putting it into a remote situation. So they said they were in a virtual conference where when they needed tech help, like they had to move their little avatar person to a specific area, to the tech support area, to go get tech support.
Was this
And I
one of
was
those Second Life things, like when that was going on?
yeah, I don't know. I mean, I know I don't know if you remember, like we attended one where like you had to go to like different rooms and a stage. Like so it wasn't like we had a person that moved around, but we had to click around to go to different things. And so I'm assuming it was like that. And so for like tech support, you had to go to, and I'm just like that's part of like being in person that stinks when you have to go run out to go find where the tech support people are to go get them to come in versus like being able to just pull up an app and be like, hey, I'm in this room or this is where I'm at. Can you come and help me? I was like, yeah, that's how to like take a poor practice and apply it into another situation where it doesn't need to apply.
I think that's a great way to kind of wrap up this section because one thing we do know is people had a lot to say about remote work. They have strong opinions, lots to say about virtual events. So, anything else as we wrap up? This section was organization, management, best practices. Anything, any other nuggets you have that you want to share?
No, yeah. So, if, let us know what you think. You agree with some of the things we've talked about, disagree, have additional thoughts about it. Just let us know. And next time we'll be back with the flip side of this pair of conversations. So we talked about why remote work is being implemented, and so next time we'll be talking about why remote work is being mandated against. Bet you have some thoughts on that already.
I do. All right. Take care. Leave us comments if you have anything to add.